What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caparoso. Day 3 reaction. Jets made their last pick, the last pick in the NFL draft. Have also started adding some undrafted free agents. Going to discuss that, pick up where Connor and Meeks left off. If you haven't got to listen yet, they discussed what was a very eventful round 4, round 5, and round 6 for the Jets, which involved multiple running backs, a future quarterback, a JFM trade, a lot of action. I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll also answer some of your Discord questions. Then myself and Will will be back on tomorrow to put a bow on the entire weekend, give some grades, and reflect, which I'll also do a little bit tonight on what's been a crazy 3 days in a good way. So off the top, Jets closed the draft out. They had to make this type of pick at some point, right? They take Jalen Key, a defensive back, a safety from Alabama, 24 years old. The only player we had this year who didn't make the draft guide, which is always a little bit of a red flag. Guys like Zaire Barnes and Jared Bernard-Converse didn't make it last year. It always kind of gets on my radar when that occurs, but it's the last pick of the draft. So it's effectively an undrafted free agent. Jets certainly needed another body at safety. He joins Tony Adams, Chuck Clark, Ashton Davis. This is still a position that's primed to add a veteran. They now have more cap flexibility post JFM trade, for better or worse. And, with Key, you got a guy who's going to be, he's older, he's a little rough around the edges. Can he hold up as an NFL player? Probably not, but you're throwing a dart here. And no draft would pass without the Jets taking an older secondary player late, which they did, and they always do, no matter who is the general manager. So Key is that pick after a very offensive heavy draft up until they ended up taking Stiggers, who we of course talked about here earlier this week, which is just ultimately hysterical and a great call by Connor, and some really heartwarming videos of the staff calling him and that working out. Will be an immediate fan favorite and a guy everyone is rooting for. And they needed to throw a dart in a corner too, because I don't know how much longer after this year DJ Reed is going to be here. You start looking at the undrafted free agent list. The biggest name that they've added so far is Leonard Taylor from Miami. He was ranked as a 5th-round prospect in our draft guide by Dan, who I know is particularly intrigued by this player, and the Jets need defensive linemen now in a post-JFM world. So he's one to keep an eye on. He's probably the most highly regarded name. They also added McGregor from Michigan as an edge rusher. Interesting dart throw there. Beyond that, Trey Jenkins from San Jose State, not someone in our draft guide, but again, a safety corner hybrid. Jarius Monroe from Tulane, a cornerback. You could see some defensive concentration here, where I think there's faith in the staff to develop some of these guys, or one of them to break through. Jimmy Carlo, a linebacker from Army. Jets, no draft picks at linebacker. They're going to roll with Sherwood as the third guy behind Quincy and CJ Mosley. And they also added Michael Chris Ike, another running back from Delaware State. I believe that was just an invite to minicamp. There'll be a few more that trickle in. I think ultimately Taylor will be the headline. And think of him just like another, 7th round pick to go with Key. These guys are going to have an uphill climb to make the roster. But look, you never know. And for the Jets, it was an uneven day 3, right? There was a lot of movement up and down the board. I do really like them getting the future 3 for next year. And here's why, and I'll speak to this a little bit more in some of your Discord questions. This has been flagged in a few places. That 3rd round pick is an asset to trade for a veteran, whether right before the season or right before the trade deadline. And now they have 2 3s next year. I saw Meeks tweet about this. Devontae Adams, Raiders are clearly a rebuilding team with a new staff. That is still on the table potentially, and you have the assets for it now. Could be for another receiver, could be for anything. You have that holstered now. I don't love needing to move on from JFM. I know it's a money thing. They gave him away for nothing ultimately. He's a pretty unique player, a guy who can play outside, inside, move around, does a lot of the dirty work on the defense. I know the party line is that Michael Clemens could take that role. Michael Clemens just isn't really good and hasn't been good throughout 2 years here. He's nowhere near the player that JFM is, and isn't like much younger either. I think he's like 18 months younger. So do you get a Calais Campbell? I know Will McDonald will take a bigger role a little bit, but he's not a similar player to JFM either. Reddick will play some more on early downs. I just think the Jets they're going to miss him. And the kind of the collection overall on the defensive line, losing him, losing Quentin Jefferson, losing Huff. Of course, you get Reddick back, who's going to be awesome. Kinlaw, you hope that Saleh could really unlock. It's just, did they take kind of a step back there overall? You hope that the coaching can make the difference, but I'm not going to act like I was excited about that. I think perplexing to take two running backs anywhere you slice it. You know, you have Brees, you took Izzy last year. To draft two running backs, again, a surprise, candidly. And I know maybe there's some special team thoughts there. Maybe one of this is a Boyer pick. Kind of two backs of the same mold with Allen. I like Allen as a, you know, not a change of pace per se, but he's a different style runner. He's got that upright Eddie George, kind of like Sean Green style. Like, I don't want to say a plotter, but he's a bowling ball back there. Guy squats 1,000,000 pounds, and you're seeing all the videos of him in the weight room, and was a really productive player at a very high-end program. You know, the Davis one is a little bit of a head scratcher after already taking him. You know, a somewhat similar player. The comp in our guide was ex-Jet Stephen Ridley, of all people. Just four running backs. What does this say about Izzy? It was confusing. And I don't think we have to act like it wasn't confusing. I like that they took the developmental QB. I thought it was going to be Pratt. It ended up being Travis, the other guy they did a good amount of work on. His athleticism and him being able to sit behind Rodgers and Tyrod, smart move. And I'm glad that they took a developmental quarterback. So it's just like any draft, right? There's always going to be a couple players ultimately, whatever we say here, like they're not going to amount to much, and that's okay. That's normal for the draft. If Olu and Malachi Corley are legitimate pieces here, especially Fashanu, and you get like one of these other guys to be a consistent contributor in some way, you're relatively happy. And, you know, can they get that out of the collection of players, the five that they added after those two? I think so. Allen in particular, I think will be interesting to watch. Travis, you know, we're not going to see this year in any shape or form. Davis, does he make the roster? Does he knock Izzy off the roster? Stiggers, you feel like will have an ability to stick in sort of a hybrid special teams backup defensive back capacity. Key will have an uphill climb to make the roster because I think the Jets will add a veteran. And, you know, then when you look at the UDFAs, usually there's one or two of these guys who make noise. Taylor should have an interesting opportunity, especially if the Jets don't add a veteran. So just a very active day three. I like the offensive concentration overall, and I'm still honestly so psyched about the Corley pick that, you know, I can't say I didn't love everything today, but I also like complaining too much about this stuff at this stage until you see how the whole roster comes together. We're in deep dart throw territory when we're talking about 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. So let's get to some of your Discord questions that came in, because I want to get through as many of these as possible because you guys have been great. This one's from BritJet97. Someone please help me with all this trading back and down to next year. Our roster is so good and complete with so few holes that there are really so many players who we didn't rate or didn't need or want that other teams were happy to take. Where is the mistake here? It's either to use them or this isn't them being a bit arrogant. Plus, I thought the consensus is that we didn't need a bunch of roster-filling round dart throws this year, but a handful of round 2 to 3 guys who will stick. Totally confused. So I think frustration and the general sentiment is like, what's with all like the hijinks and moving around? Like, well, look, when it was all said and done, you know, we said the Jets would probably leave with 6 players, 5 or 6 players. They leave with 7. It's not like they left with 9 or 10. And the 7th rounder is effectively a UDFA. So 6 is kind of the number that they left with. I get the sentiment a little bit. I was very much like concentrate more picks in the higher rounds. And I think they probably got a little too cute with some of the trade backs and the trade ups. Like there was some talent to be had there at positions where they could still use some help. I do think they very intentionally got a 3rd round pick for next year to be ready to pounce in the veteran market at the trade deadline. And that's just going to be something to keep an eye on. But I do get the general like frustration. Like they're not going to really carry 4 running backs most likely, right? So we're like one of these 2 backs like going to be like a Kuntz or a Barnes or Bernard Converse and like not even be a factor. You know, Travis is probably, you know, he's not going to be on the practice squad because they don't want to risk losing him, but obviously he's not going to play or be active at all this year unless something goes wrong. Key's probably not going to make the team, but we'll see. And Stinger's even going to have an uphill battle to make the team. So I get it. And what I'm kind of holding out is that third round pick going to be used for a veteran, either over the summer or at the trade deadline. Next question from Hamlet. Actually, well, this one, let's go from Isles Jets, who kind of agreed with the sentiment from Brit Jet. You and I are on the same page, 40-year-old QB, 2 tackles on a 1-year deal, but we're making moves for the future. Again, getting the pick for next year, is that used to go get a veteran? Having that extra asset, is there a receiver they have in mind? Because they still need help at pass catcher. Is it, if someone goes down, the ability to add a player at that position? I think there's some more moves coming. And it might not be immediately, it might be right before the season, it might be at the trade deadline, but they're solid with draft capital now that can be utilized in that capacity. I'm a little less worried about the tackle depth and the tackle situation now, certainly with Fashanu, and with Warren has like your backup depth option. I think that's pretty good balance there overall. This one from Rich, still trying to wrap my head around 2 running back selections. Do you think we could see more Breece out of the slot or 2 RB looks? Maybe. I mean, look, Breece is a very unique player. He's going to be used as a pass catcher a lot. They should move him around more than they have in the past because he's that unique of a player. The guys they drafted are, I mean, no one's like Breece, but they're very different than Izzy. You're not going to like carry 4 running backs that are that young. I would think they're probably not going to add a veteran at this point. So I think those guys are just going to battle for a roster spot. And they can say whatever they want. Drafting 2 running backs kind of tells you everything that you need to know about what they think about Izzy after 1 year, fair or unfair. It's not a good sign of things to come for his roster spot that they went and spent effectively back-to-back picks on running backs on day 3. So I understand why having depth and options behind Breece. He has gotten hurt in his career, but it was surprising. I'm not going to act like it's like the Jets taking 2 running backs was like, it was kind of baffling. And like, it wasn't like Davis was like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy fell. Like, it's an insane value pick. And Davis might end up being better than Allen. I think, we're talking more about Allen because he was picked higher. And I do think is a better overall prospect, but still taking 2 running backs without question, surprising. From M. Kava, how much of an influence do you think Rodgers had on this draft? If you had to put a percent on it, less than 15%. I don't think like Rodgers is in the war room. I don't think they're on the phone or texting him all day. He seemed as, not in a negative way, but he seemed just as like surprised as anybody that Fashanu was the pick, and he's talking about him playing guard. I think we like to joke about him being the actual GM. I think in the pro market, he's without question very involved when it comes to draft weekend. Do I think he's grinding tape on the guys that they're taking on day 3 and like giving input? Absolutely not. I don't. I think a lot of this goes to the area scouts, and he probably knows next to nothing about any of these guys except maybe for Jordan Travis because he keeps his eye on college quarterbacks. So I don't think he had much of an input, especially in the stuff that happened on day 3. Next question from our Carter Warren. Man, this is for Connor. I'll let him answer this when he gets back on. It's about Giovanni Manu, who went super, super high compared to where Connor had him on the big board. So we'll have Connor speak to that when we record again Tuesday night, along with some of your other questions. From Hudson Jet, after the JFM trade was announced, did you expect that at least one of our day 3 picks would go to DL depth now that we're thinner both inside and outside? I did. I think the UDFA signing is going to kind of be that late round pick in Leonard Taylor. And I think also McGregor too. They'll throw those guys in the mix and see if one of them could stick. I'd also still watch Calais Campbell now that JFM's gone. There's probably more to come there. If they're counting on Clemens that much, that's a bit of a red flag. I don't think he's really capable of taking on a bigger role. I think he should be like fighting for a roster spot more so than anything. But yeah, I would have thought there would have been a higher priority on drafting defensive lineman. I would, instead of taking 2 running backs, I probably would have used one of those picks on a defensive lineman. Let's see how it shakes out overall. The Jets did also announce that they're going to pick up AVT's 5th-year extension. I think it makes sense. I'm a big fan of AVT. I feel like he's had 2 really fluky injuries at the exact same field and like will be a very good starter here for a very long time. And now they could settle into one spot. Hopefully that plays to his benefit, but just a super talented player that you want to keep control of because Tyron Smith's old, Morgan Moses is old, Simpson's, a little bit of a question mark. Tippmann we like, but he's still a little bit of a question mark. Of course, they have Olu now, but no reason not to keep AVT in-house, especially after you just parted ways with a veteran for pennies in JFM. So I was happy to see AVT sticking around, one of my favorite players in the team and a guy who I think is uniquely talented. So look, we're going to do a more holistic like draft grades, which of course are always like funny one day after. Will and I will go a little longer tomorrow on that. And then in the coming weeks, we'll have the ability to really dive into all these guys, and we'll get some film rooms going with Dan and Connor on these picks, particularly on the running backs and on Corley. And we'll do the same with Fashanu as well. There's a lot to look at over these next few months. Big thank you to everyone for following all the content. I think we released like somewhere around like 30 posts this week, like between the articles and the podcasts and the videos. And it's been great to see all the engagement in Discord, here on YouTube, Patreon. If you're watching this on YouTube, we've been releasing a slightly higher volume here, but when we get back into our rhythm, all the content's on Patreon, and you're only getting a small sliver of it here on YouTube. So that's what I'm referring to. Everywhere. And a big thanks to the team, because everyone is doing amazing work and contributing, and I'll continue to shout this out. Paul did a great job pulling together our draft party Thursday night, where it was, again, awesome to see everybody also driving on the merch. BadlandsTOJ.com, this thing, I haven't taken it off since I got it. It's very comfortable, and I like the way it looks. These are 20% off until Sunday night with promo code Veggies, along with our new Yetis, which are almost sold out. I think we ordered 25 and like 21 are gone already. Also, if you buy during the flash sale, we have 2 prints from our guy, Matty G, who's like the most talented artist in the world, certainly within the Jets fandom, that will ship out. One of Breece Hall, one of Aaron Rodgers. So I'll pick 2 winners at random when we start shipping the product. So go get a quarter zipper Yeti, and you might win a picture on top of that too. Jake did a great job, despite being kind of all over the place this week, turning around audio that I screwed up. What Connor and I recorded yesterday, somehow managed to fix it like immediately and save the episode, which is incredible. It was like a true hero ball move, considering all the stuff he was, dealing with this week. Dan again on the guide and forgetting to buck the trend out yesterday. And we'll hear from him, more throughout this week. Again, the guide, the actual functionality of it is incredible. And then Dan also does the scouting and the content around it, which is just always great. And he's one of the best out there, particularly when it comes to talking on the defensive side of the ball and defensive fronts. Will, with a gazillion pieces of content, as always, always has interesting information in and around the team. Did a great job on the live pod with us. Will pod with me tomorrow, and has been cranking nonstop. Meigs, ton of content from Meigs, always entertaining. Did a great job with the guide as well, and appreciate how much he's been able to contribute over these last few days in particular. Dalbin wrote a gazillion articles this week, and I'm sure we'll write a gazillion more articles, and we'll be back on draft season with Meigs. We missed him at the draft party, but I always love getting content from him. So, everyone pitching in, everyone contributing. It's always awesome to see. And these next few months will be fun as we ramp up for the season. And we're already brainstorming on a couple different things that, we want to do for next year. So a very full day 3, more content to come tomorrow with Will and I, likely and other guys Monday morning with Jake and Paul. And then we're back in our normal routine. Connor and I will have War Room Tuesday night. We'll have the pod Wednesday. We'll announce our best ball draft before the end of the month so we can get everyone in that. If you haven't yet, sign up at Underdog with promo code Badlands so you're ready to rock there. And thank you for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Enjoy your Saturday night.